Hello everyone and welcome to this video, which is in our Great Engine opening series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we're doing a little segue today over from the Piets to the modern. Of course the two openings are quite related. If black plays the move knight f6 at some stage, you often get transpositions directly into the Piets. But that's one of the key things about the modern, is that you keep this knight on g8 for a long period of time. And why do you do that? There's two ideas. First of all, keeping the knight on g8, then the advance e4 to e5, which is so dangerous in the Piets, is much more absorbable with the modern. Secondly, that knight covers the square h6, so those plans of a quick queen d2, well, bishop e3 or f4 g5, followed by queen d2, bishop h6 to exchange off the dark squared bishops, weaken the black king side, they're not really possible. So, you know, in some way you're sort of keeping white at bay by keeping the knight on g8. Of course, you know, the thing that you have to think of is, what am I doing then with black if I'm not developing my king side? And, very often you try and expand on the queen side, gain space, influence there. And once you've done that, then you'll move over to developing your king side. Several ways of doing it. We're going to have a look at the most popular way of doing it, which you can sort of call the tiger method, named after the Swedish grandmaster Tiger Hillard Persson, who wrote a great book on the modern quite a while back. And that is just you're going to aim to play a6, you're going to aim to play b5, knight d7, c5. You might play the bishop to b7, but often that bishop's useful just to cover this sensitive e6 square. And you'll get this counterplay in, and then once you've done that, gain some space, gain some influence, disrupted the white position, then you're going to go knight f6 and probably castle the king on the king side, although you do see it going to the queen side as well from time to time. So can be quite hard to sort of get a grip of with white, because, you know, all your standard plans that are, you know, central and king side based don't quite seem to work somehow. But the engines managed to make it beautifully concrete. And whilst I was analysing with Dragon and Stockfish, they came up with a very nice idea that hadn't really just occurred to me before. Actually, when I looked it up, it's also mentioned in Viktor Moskalenko's book on the Piets and modern that I've talked about a little bit in past videos. So that's pretty good. Good he mentioned it. But it's pretty venomous, and well, let's have a look how it all goes. So this is e4 g6, d4 bishop g7, knight c3 d6, and now a bishop e3. That's also one of the main lines against the modern. We've had a look at bishop f4 and bishop g5 against the Piets. Had a look at a lot of these dark square development moves. These moves aren't really that super against the modern. Bishop's lacking a bit of a target really, and here, can get hit by e5 quite easily. But the bishop on e3 is quite a main line. And then black's idea here, very modern-y, a6, just leaving the knight on g8, preparing to expand on the queen side. Now, the next move is really quite deceptive, because you know, I mean, you're thinking about f4 or queen d2 and castle queen side and all that, and the engines like knight f3 very much. And it just looks, you know, to me, the first impression I get is, oh, okay, just a normal developing move, nothing too aggressive here, you know. So, you know, as black, I'd very automatically play the normal modern move, which is b5, and just sort of think, well, you know, probably white's going to develop normally with bishop d3 and castles. I'm going to get my stuff in. I'm going to be fine. Indeed, in this position, there was a recent game, Nihal Sarin against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, and white played the move h3, you know, which is again pretty normal move. Stops the bishop coming to g4, makes sure the bishop on e3 is safe. But the engines in this position want the move h4. It's like you know, you can hear the sudden shifting gears as you just go from knight f3, then h4. So what is the point of that? Well, of course there is always logic, of course. Black's delayed playing the knight to f6, so it means that h4 to h5 is completely possible. And yeah, I mean, if you start trying to stop it with a move like h5, for example, then the knight on f3 is ready to hop into g5 immediately, and this is a little bit irritating for black. I mean, in the Tiger modern lines that I was talking about earlier, White he was often analysing lines where White played the move f3 and then tried to play knight h3 into g5 in such circumstances. But black was always taking the knight off on h3. That was one of the tenets of his systems, and then stopping the knight getting into g5. There's a very famous game that's analysed on the Game Changer YouTube site, I think, with the knight getting to g5 in the game against Stockfish Classical, and Stockfish Classical barely hangs on. I think the book's in Game Changer as well, the book. So always very dangerous, that. But one thing that you might say is, well, why don't I just play knight f6? After all, I'm stopping h5, and I'm actually even threatening b4 and undermining the pawn on e4. That looks pretty reasonable, doesn't it? Also, since you haven't played h3, I'm attacking g4. This knight could come into g4 and irritate this bishop on e3 as well. And I have to say that I was somewhat taken aback by White's next move, which was h5. Stockfish was very keen on this, because I was sort of looking at it and I was thinking, well, after knight h5, I mean, after all, rook h5, this is not going to be dangerous, right? I mean, I wouldn't want to have my knight on f3 together with this move. It's blocking queen takes h5. So what on earth do the engines have in mind? What they have in mind is the move knight g5. And I have not seen this sort of combination before, really, this h5 just as a pawn sack and then knight g5. And it's been played very little. Maybe I had 6-7 games with this, and not the highest rated either, but some very destructive wins for White. So, I mean, what is the point of knight g5? Well, you really are threatening rook takes h5 now, because your queen's ready to come in and you'll be attacking f7. So black has to do something about this knight. You can't just ignore it. And black's basically got three possibilities. One line that has been played in human games is the move h6. Quite logical, right? I mean, you're sort of saying, well, you want to take this one, I want to take this one. But this is actually quite bad. You take on f7 here. King takes f7, and now you've got two move orders. You can play e5, or you can play queen f3 check. Don't worry, all this is going to be in PGNs that I'll put on my in the normal place as always, so you don't need to write this all down frantically. But let's do queen f3 check. That seems like the most forcing. Obviously, if the knight comes back, you've got e5 with a few little threats here. So king g8 played, and now e5 anyway, hitting the rook. And after c6, a novelty, strangely enough, rook a7 has been played, but that looks very odd with this here. So c6, and now the move g4, and you're just actually picking up this knight on h5. And well, you can actually play this and force the exchange of queens, but the engines are super keen on this position. It's not 100% obvious to me. It looks good, but I didn't really realise that it was as winning as all that. But well, you can have a look at the PGNs. This is a very, very promising position for White. I mean, the key thing: these pieces are not developed and not getting very easily developed, whereas White's got plenty of time, and this black king's also not very good either. All adds up. So that is well known from human games. Knight f6 has also been played in human games. And here White just keeps on going. So e5 takes, queen d1, rook d1. And this is the typical Piet's modern problem that, you open the d file, you exchange off the queens, but then the c7 square becomes very, very sensitive, and knight d5 is coming in once this knight gets driven away. So knight g4 was played in all the human games, but I had to force the engines to play it. You just got this very strong, and this is actually was played in a human game. This was played. Now knight takes h7 with some ideas of knight f6 was played in a game Vega Gutierrez against Carissa Yip, actually. So this was in Chartres Blitz women's final. Europe Échec 2020. I guess that's probably online. Black lost quickly, but knight h7 isn't the strongest. The strongest move is bishop d4, which was played in the game. Let me just look it up. What was that game? Got lots of engine games in there. I think it was Efroimsky against Chatelbashev, Norway Chess Open 2022. And the big problem is that, this move of bishop d4 is getting rid of the protection of e5. So if you go bishop d4, we just go knight c7, king f8, and rook d4. And you can imagine that things are going wrong. The funny thing is that black manages to avoid losing a piece. Knight c6, rook takes g4, little desperado. Takes, but rook a7 happens. And you can't defend the knight, but you can go rook f4, takes, check. And takes. And this was turning out pretty good for white. The engine's seeing it as a total win. I probably think slight to clear advantage is white, but anyway, engines are happy, so we're happy theoretically. You can see how it all went in the games there. The game Efroimsky against Chatelbashev went castles, and now this very irritating idea, knight h7. And the point is, white's just winning this exchange, because if rook e8, you go knight c7, and obviously if you go rook d8, then I just go knight e7 check. So yeah, somehow this rook is trapped on f8, and the game actually ended very painfully for black. It didn't look, in some sort of way you sort of think, oh, should this really be so bad? And then you realise after rook h3 that white's just coming in with rook h1 and rook h8 and rook h7 checkmate. So yes, it really is very, very serious indeed for black. The best move that the engines found was to play the move knight h5, but after knight d5, bishop e5, maybe you want to give yourself a tactical exercise here, because there's an absolutely stunning move here, I have to say. Maybe if you saw a previous video I did on the game Marvin against Boot, this incredible game from the TCC Swiss, then you might actually trigger you. Because what white plays in this position is to the move g4. So getting ready to play the bishop to g2, and the move bishop takes g4 is met by the very cunning bishop d4. So attacking this bishop, and now if you take, I take on here, and I'm attacking the bishop now, which I've dragged to g4, and I'm also threatening knight takes c7. Glorious tactics. The best move is knight f6, but after bishop g2, black's in huge problems here. We've got moves like f4 coming in. Can take a look at the PGNs. It's quite similar to what happens in the game, actually, so I'm not going to go through it twice, but that's just really, really dangerous. So the engines play the novelty e6, and that allows black to deal with this move rook h5, because we'll simply have the move queen e7 to defend everything. I mean, it's still quite dangerous there. We'll go e5 or whatever, but actually the engines want e5 here, not even taking that pawn yet. But it's not that great. But the engines just have a plan. I mean, it just power just coming out through all these moves. So knight f6 and now e5, no respite. Takes bishop g2, good timing, attacking the rook, forcing c6. So you can see that we've got some very weak dark squares all around here, and a very unhappy bishop on c8 as well, blocked in by all these pawns on light squares. So d takes e5 played, but whilst white is collecting dynamic advantages, black is collecting pawns. That's 2. Bishop c5 played, blocking this pawn, also stopping the king from castling. If you go something like knight d7, I've got bishop c6, so you're not escaping that way. But black plays the move bishop e5. Knight e5, knight c4 is horrific, with knight d6 check coming in. So bishop takes c5 played, and the idea is, you're 3 pawns up, and you're also still covering this d6 square. But now 3 pawns is never enough. The engines want f4. And I have to say, that the tactics are quite complicated. I mean, I was playing through these games, and I was trying, I was taking my time trying to understand what's all this about. And I was getting there, but not only, but I was sort of getting there and saying, it's that, is it? You know, it's that sort of thing. It's not at all obvious. The point is, after bishop f4, we're playing this move knight h7 again. I guess if you've played through some of the previous lines, you'll get the idea. It's simply we're simply threatening knight f6 check with a discovered attack. And then if you play a move like bishop e5, I'm going knight e4, which reinforces this idea. Rook g8 is necessary, and then bishop f3, hitting the knight on g4 there. So f5 is the best, but we go knight d6 and takes. And I mean, black's absolutely paralysed. We're even going to be doing stuff like maybe take on g4 with threatening knight f6, of course. But if black finds some way to deal with it, we can you know, just come in like that, and okay, your 3 pawns down as white, but black's got nothing, no development, nothing at all. So yeah, the engines don't want to take that 4th pawn. It's what they want to do is to play bishop c3. It's not the move they want to play, but it stops knight e4 to d6, and obviously by taking something you gain a tempo for the next defensive move. And well, the big threat is to go knight takes h7, followed by knight f6. So h5 is played. I mean, look at all those pawns on light squares and that poor light squared bishop. Now, amazingly, you know, the engines only assess this as 0.72 for white. So, yeah, got plenty of compensation for 3 pawns and a bit more besides, but they do think they can hold it. After rook h3, well, Stockfish thinks it can hold it all the time, Dragon from time to time. So after rook h3, I'll just show you the main line. There's lots of stuff in the PGM. Basically, this is quite a forced line now for the engines. They weren't looking at anything else. The engines are just trying to blast through on the dark squares with white, and black's just trying to somehow trying to make it all fit together. And yeah, rook d6 played, fg, rook e5, white starts picking up pawns, rook d g6, h3, bishop h1, and this is kind of you know, crucial sort of positions you're getting to, and yeah, not easy, this one. I mean, white's just a pawn down, black's completely tied up, but somehow it's one of those, reminds me very much of, you know, Stockfish Classical against AlphaZero somehow, you know, that these sort of positions where black sort of, you know, will just defend everything. I think a5 and rook a6 was the plan, to deal with rook b6, protect c6 a little bit, and just hold, basically. And, yeah, I mean, you know, the engines as white were really trying to make something of this, but most of the games were ending in draws. So presumably black can hold this, but let me. I think it doesn't need any saying really that I wouldn't try this at home at black. This is not at all what you want to be doing. So, I mean, this is unbelievably dangerous, right? So, is there anything that black could really do in these sort of positions? Well, what Stockfish wanted was to play the move h6 in this position, which yeah, stops the pawn from moving up h5 to h6, but you know, keeps control of some squares, keeps control of g5, and yeah, there have been some human games in this, not too convincing. What the engines wanted got very interesting actually, so I'll just show you the main line. Was bishop d3, e6, knight e2, knight f6, a4. This is the sort of the downside to black playing b5 early. You know, we can sort of start attacking it, and takes and c5. Very much Grunfeld style, this, that you know, you don't really mind white taking on c5, maybe even winning a pawn, because yeah, that would break up the white pawn structure. I'm not sure if you can hear any banging behind, but that's the window cleaner being very energetic. So white plays h5, just you know, basically trying to open the h file. So black keeps it closed with g5. Knight g3, knight c6, castles and castles. And I actually let a Dragon 3.3 have a huge look at this. Millions millions of millions of nodes, basically. That's what Dragon spent on this, and well, I like doing this a lot because what often happens with Stockfish somehow, I always find, is that Stockfish sort of takes a look at something, sees that a very aggressive continuation is not much better than a quieter one, and then just shows the quiet continuation. But Dragon's normally about let's give the aggressive one and the sack a go, and it sort of sometimes just reveals lines to you that would be horrific for a human to defend, but that Stockfish doesn't really think would be too difficult. And Dragon was looking at rook b1, queen c7, and now this move knight takes g5. Very, very dangerous sack, this one. H takes g5, bishop g5. I mean, you're just threatening stuff like h6 and knight h5 and f4 and all of that. It looks completely winning to me, I have to say, but it's not. So this was how actually both Dragon and also Stockfish as well were looking at this. I think I ran Stockfish for a little bit less, but that was 312,000 million nodes. So my machines were sort of pumping away on that. Takes knight h5, knight h7, queen e1. We're coming round to g3. Rook e8, queen g3, king f8. F5, d takes c3, queen h4. You can see that a human would have no chance of holding this. These were pretty much only moves for black. Knight d4, knight f6. Quite nice idea, actually. You're just exchanging pieces in order to get your queen somehow in there. Bishop f6, rook e7. The only way to escape, queen g4, knight f6, queen g5. Yes, a human player would play queen g7 check and take on there. An engine thinks queen g5 is fine too. Takes h7, bishop b7, rook c1, c2, rook b2, bishop c6, takes, queen c8, and well, basically the engines thought that this was 0.52 for white, so a slight advantage, but not a win. Well, okay, you can see the sort of craziness that ensues there. So h6 is a better move, but again, actually just a very simple plan for white, very thematic as well. But you move your knight over to g3, you attack the queen side with a4, very much like a Rai Lopez. Get the pawn to h5, and then at some stage sack on g5. I mean, it's not such a difficult plan to remember once you've seen it with white, and for black it's absolutely horrific. Funnily enough, I mean, what you do realise when looking at the Piets and the modern together is that one of the key advantages of the modern is that you can transpose to the Piets later. And it reminds me very much, actually, of the Dutch Stonewall, because I used to I played the Dutch Stonewall from move one, with one f5 and the Dutch move order and everything, and was quite successful with it. But at some stage, I sort of realised that the lines of the Dutch Stonewall that I particularly wanted, white had some move orders to make that quite awkward. And well, if you don't get exactly the line that you wanted, then sometimes the Dutch Stonewall is not such a happy opening. And I sort of realised that I was very happy playing Dutch Stonewall structures, so I started playing them transposing from Queen's Indians or from Catalans as black. But playing the Dutch Stonewall directly was a little bit too much of an acquired taste for me, and I have that feeling very much with the Piets. There are some lines of the Piets when you play it straight away that are somewhat awkward, and you sort of think, oh, I don't like having my knight on f6. But playing it through a modern move order, you can sort of tweak the move order, push white into a certain direction, and then go back to the Piets, and find that that's actually quite decent. And well, you see that with the Dragon and Stockfish a lot, because in this position, after knight f3, the engine said, no, you can't play in the modern way anymore. That's not possible. Here you've got to play the move knight f6. And we're back into a Piets. Now, you're committed to this move a6, but that's actually quite a decent idea. In fact, I lost a game against Vasily Ivanchuk more than 25 years ago. Ivanchuk came up with a very important novelty that's still absolutely the 100% recommended engine move in this position. How did it go, actually? Trying to remember. Was it... I think it was Queen d2, b5, bishop h6, castles, bishop d3, and now Vasily really surprised me with this move, knight c6. I think this was the one. But it's actually a very, very good move indeed. Looks so odd to put the knight in front of the c-pawn after you've played b5, but that's still the best line, I think, for black. But okay, it's you know, it is in principle a pleasant advantage for white, you know. So this move, knight f3, definitely very nice, quite innocuous looking, which is, I think, part of its strength. And you know, the idea that you, after b5, such a natural move for a modern player, that h4 is really, really strong. Especially that you know, the idea is this very unusual idea of just sacrificing the pawn and then playing the knight to g5. I think it's got very high potential for, you know, for really catching out black players. So if you're a black modern player, do take a look. If you're a white player looking for something against the modern, well, have a look at this system. It could be very dangerous. And yeah, this move, bishop e3, is a very nice move, you know, against the modern too, because well, it dissuades black from going c5, protects the d4 pawn, and it's very flexible there. You can play a move like knight f3 and even play quietly afterwards there with bishop e2 and castles, or you can play aggressive moves with queen d2 castles. You can play h3 or h4. You can even play f4 as well. So, you know, it's a very flexible move. So you know, also I think definitely worth looking at. So there we are. I've got a little bit of a high-level summary of this on my blog as well. So do take a look at that. That can maybe be quite useful just to get a, you know, just a nice feel for the lines first before you dive into the associated PGM. But if you enjoyed the video, why not give a like, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, or take a look at my new books, Silicon Road to Chess Improvement and Reengineering the Chess Classics, which is hopefully full of good human explanation like this about really gorgeous engine stuff and engine discoveries in classic games. And otherwise, you know, thanks very much for watching, and keep your eyes peeled. Lots more great videos to come. Thanks for watching.